push the left button on the radio key, the off button, and that'll take us to the next SecurityGuard programming option, which is range. The range option selects between high and low of what detection range you want on the main PIR on the SecurityGuard. Low will then reduce the detection area to typically 8 meters, where high would lift the range to about 12 meters. While we're in the range setting, pushing the on button will cycle through the two options between high and low. Once you've selected the option you wish, you then press and hold the panic button, and this will then save the setting. The programming sequence is identical as we go through the SecurityGuard. Hitting the on button will then cycle through the submenu options, and the panic button will then save that option. Once you've programmed the range option, you then press the left button or the unlock button on the radio key. Takes you to the next option, which is pulse. Pulse relates to the onboard PIR on the SecurityGuard, and it effectively sets how many detection pulses are required before it will activate an alarm. This range between 1, 2, 3 and 4 will then virtually makes that onboard PIR more or less sensitive to false alarms. Once you've got the option you want, you then push the panic button to save this option. Pushing the off button on the radio key will then take us to the next option, which is signal or radio signal strength. Pressing the on button on the radio key will take us into the signal strength option. In here we can check the signal strength of your radio keys and radio devices or radio detection devices. Once selected this option, the SG3 will then listen and wait for a radio signal to be received. Once it receives a signal, it will display the name of the radio device that sent the signal, example key 1, key 2, etc., sensor 2, sensor 3, and once it receives that signal, it'll also display the strength between 1 for weak and 9 for strong. Pressing the on button on the radio key will get into the signal strength check, and to test a radio key you press the panic button to send a signal strength check to the SecurityGuard. For checking the signal strength for a PIR, a radio read switch, etc., while you're in the signal strength mode, simply activate the detector and the SecurityGuard will display the signal strength it's received. This is a great tool to see how good your signal is that's being received back at the SecurityGuard from the detection device. Pressing the off button on the radio key will take us to the next option, which is radio jam or radio jamming alarm. When the radio jamming alarm feature is enabled in the SecurityGuard, it will generate a chime in the disarmed, home or home 2 modes if it receives continuous source of radio interference. If the SG3 is armed, the system will go into full alarm. Pressing the on button on the radio key will cycle through the sub options, which is off, which means it's disabled, on means it's enabled, you'll get the chimes and alarm, or silent, which means it will still be active but it will only report through to the control room. If you wish to change this setting, select the option you wish, push and hold the panic button, and this will then save your setting. Pushing the off button on the radio key will then cycle through to the next option, which is radio message substitution alarm. If radio sub is enabled, the SG3 will generate a chime alarm in the disarmed home or home 2 modes and a full alarm when the panel is armed if it senses an intentional radio message substitution being received that has not been sent from an SG3 detection device or a radio key. Pushing the on button on the radio key will cycle through the sub-menus, which is off as default or on enable this alarm. Once you've selected the option you want, push and hold the panic button, which will then save this setting. Pushing the off button on the radio key moves us to the next option, which is radio supervision interval. All Ness wireless detectors, whether it be PIR, smoke detector, radio read switch, etc., will send a supervision signal every hour if enabled. Setting this option in the SG3 sets up at what interval should the SG3 be looking for this supervision signal being sent if it has been enabled in the detection device. If it doesn't receive a supervision signal before this time expires, it can then generate an alarm. Although this feature is often only used for higher security applications, it's always recommended to have at least 4 or 8 hours enabled, and not often is it set for 1 hour. Pressing the on button on the radio key will then take us into this option, and then each subsequent press of the on button will cycle through the options between 1 hour, 4 hours, 8 hours, 16 hours, or 24 hours, or back to default, which is off. Once you select the option that you wish, if you wish to enable it all, press and hold the panic button to save your setting. Pressing the off button on the radio key takes us to the next option, which is lockout or alarm lockout. Alarm lockout prevents the sirens from sounding due to multiple activations from the same detection device. It should be noted that the external siren will only sound once on an activation of alarm until the system is disarmed and then armed again. This is to comply with a lot of the council's or government's regulations for noise on external sirens. What this alarm lockout feature does, it controls the SecurityGuard's internal siren or built-in siren. Pushing the on button on the radio key will take you into the lockout option, and then subsequent pushes of the on button will cycle between on and off to enable or disable this option. Once you've selected the option you wish, you then press and hold the panic button on a valid radio key to save your setting. Pushing the off button on the radio key again takes us to the next option, which is entry delay time. The entry delay time allows you time to disarm the system once a detector is activated. The SG3 is normally armed or disarmed by a radio key from outside the protected area, but in some instances you may want to disarm from inside the premises, so therefore you may want to adjust this time. If you do wish to adjust the entry time, pressing the on button on the radio key will take you into the settings, and subsequent pressing of the on button on the radio key will cycle through the sub-menu, which is adjustable time between 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20, 25, 30, and back to 5 seconds at default. Once you have set the time that you wish, pressing and holding the panic button will then save your setting. Pushing the off button on the radio key will take us to the next option, which is exit delay time. The exit delay time is very similar to the entry, but in this instance, when we arm the system with the radio key, it's the time that we've got to exit the premises before all the detection devices will become active. If you wish to adjust the exit delay time, you push the on button on the radio key, and that will bring into the sub-menu for exit time, and each subsequent press of the on key will then cycle through the time, which is adjustable between 5 to 60 seconds in 5-second increments. And once you set the option that you wish, you can then press the panic button to store your required time. Pressing the off button on the radio key again moves us to the next option, which is Siren and Siren runtime. If you wish to adjust how long the siren will sound for, from the default of 5 minutes, you push the on button on the radio key, and this will take you to the sub-menu for Siren runtime. Each time you then push the on button on the radio key, it will cycle through the sub-menu, and you can then bring up between 1 to 5 minutes of how long you want the siren to sound for. Once you have got the time you wish to have, you push and hold the panic button, and that will save your setting. Pushing the off button on the radio key again takes us to the next option, which is chirps or external siren chirps. If you have an external siren connected to your system, this option allows you, every time you arm and disarm the system, to chirp or pop the outside siren. And arming, you'll get 1 chirp, and disarming, it will provide 3 chirps. It should be noted that the chirps will only occur when arming and disarming the system and not putting it in home or home 2 modes. Pressing the on button on the radio key will enter into this option, and then subsequent presses of the on button on the radio key will toggle between on and off, on being that will supply chirps, off meaning will not supply chirps. Once you have the option you wish, press and hold the panic button to lock in and save that option. Pressing the off button on the radio key again takes us to the next option, which is VARM, or voice enunciation for arming and disarming.